I don't think I can overstate the ramifications of this Tyrese Haliburton run and the impact he's having, not only on the court with that absurd Game 4, which was honestly one of the greatest playoff games we've ever seen, and I don't think I'm exaggerating there, but the overall impact on the discussion about basketball. And it's really not just Haliburton when you look at the other stars in this conference finals, but Haliburton, we all know the two guys that came before him that were similar players in Steve Nash and Chris Paul. Two guys that were top 10 players in the NBA. Steve Nash got 2 MVPs. I often wonder how Steve Nash would be remembered if he didn't get those MVPs, but that's a conversation for another day. He won them, right? And those guys were leaders of some great regular season teams that for whatever reasons did not win a championship, whether it was just being unlucky, whether they weren't good enough, whether it was a suspension for Amari Stoudemire and Boris Diaw in a Game 6, whether it was Chris Paul, Blake Griffin always getting hurt, or whether you just straight up choke like Chris Paul against OKC and blowing a 3-1 lead against Houston. Those two guys being the most quote-unquote pure point guards we've seen in the last 20 years or so, not winning at all, kind of gives fuel to the idea that you can't win that way. And Tyrese Haliburton hasn't won anything yet. He might blow a 3-1 lead here, but even him just making it to the finals, to me, does a lot for the conversation about basketball and about team building and about who the best players in the NBA actually are. Because 5 years ago, you look at someone putting up 18 and 9 like Tyrese Haliburton, that player is not being talked about in top 10 discussions, and I don't think Haliburton was this year either, but going into next year, people are going to have Tyrese Haliburton as a top 10 player in the NBA. And that was unfathomable a couple weeks ago, honestly. Now, something Tyrese Haliburton has over Steve Nash and Chris Paul is what, 6 foot? Steve Nash is listed at 6'3", but I feel like in today's NBA where they make you actually give an accurate measurement, it's probably more 6'2", 6'1", I would guess. Maybe I'm wrong in that. But Tyrese Haliburton is a legit 6'5". And I bring that up because something we always hear is small guards can't win a championship as your best player. And, as much as I want to believe that's not the case, when you look throughout history, the only example we have is Isaiah Thomas and Steph Curry to a certain degree. But Steph Curry, to me, is not like small like these other guys we're talking about. And also Steph Curry is the greatest off-ball player we've ever seen. So that alleviates a lot of the pressure, a lot of the responsibility of having to be a 6-foot guard, seeing over double teams, the 6-foot guard having to create in the lane. Obviously Steph Curry does it, but he has that time off the ball where it makes the limitations less, right? Someone like Jalen Brunson having to be on ball consistently at 5'11", you're gonna wear down to some degree, even though I don't believe that has happened to Jalen Brunson like that. I think we're seeing the limitations of Jalen Brunson being 5'11" on defense. So yeah, Tyrese Haliburton does have that advantage of being 6'5". What would Trae Young look like at 6'5"? I don't really know. Jason Kidd, the last point guard of this ilk to lead his team to a finals, if we're not counting the Phoenix Suns, Chris Paul, maybe we should count that team. But yeah, Jason Kidd, 6'4". There is a difference there. And the reason I bring it up that way is because this conference finals in general is, I want to say, out of the norm. And maybe I'm just not, remembering things correctly. But we've been so enamored by who people would say are the 3 best players in the NBA, Jokic, Giannis, Luka. And I'm not now saying, oh, I don't want those guys, but just we've been so conditioned for this 2K stat line of 30, 10, and 10. And clearly that's something you want on your team. But what if you can be just as impactful putting up 19 and 10 like Tyrese Haliburton? To me, that's kind of why this playoffs has been refreshing in a way. Even look at Minnesota, where Anthony Edwards, for years, we're talking about the next step for Ant is he has to really develop as a playmaker. And sure, he does, of course. Of course, you want Ant to be a better passer, a better facilitator, but Anthony Edwards has now made it to back-to-back conference finals, and he averages 4 assists per game. From your best player, from the guy who has the ball all the time. That doesn't seem like the NBA we were headed towards, right? Where you want your scorer to be this Luka Doncic type of player. or this James Harden type of player. But no, you got a true 2000s shooting guard giving you 27 points and 4 assists. And it's working to a certain degree, right? Because they're probably about to go home. I'm recording this before game 5. But you got a true point guard and a true shooting guard who we've been trying to combine the two for the last 10 years. And these guys are doing it at an elite level the way it used to be done. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I just didn't think we were in an NBA in 2025 that would be so welcoming of that. And even a Jalen Brunson. Like I said, the small guards can't win championships idea. The Knicks decided, you know what we're going to do? We're going to build our team around a 5'11 score. And I know Brunson does more than score. I get that. But in this world full of giants, we're going to go up against Joel Embiid and Jason Tatum, and we're going to feel like our guy is better at getting a bucket than those guys. And we're going to push that as far as possible. We're going to spend 5 first-round picks to get someone else that helps build that vision out. I'm not saying it's the smart thing to do. I'm saying I like it. I'm saying I like the commitment to it and the identity that these teams have. We talk so much about how the NBA is the same now and everyone just shoots threes, which is true to a certain degree. But just look at all these teams. They're so different. Their best players are so different, and I feel like that's a great place to be in. I don't know if I love the overall parity in the NBA where we're about to have 7 different champions in 7 straight years. I don't think that's a positive for the NBA, but it might be a positive in terms of, let's say, the opportunities that people will get now. Because now I think people are going to be looking for the next Tyrese Haliburton, where if he doesn't go on this run, I don't think anyone in today's NBA had the mindset of, you know what would really get us to the top? A true point guard. That's what we're going to build our team around. That's just not where we were a couple years ago, and I feel like Tyrese Haliburton has done a lot to shift that. And now we're going to be looking in the draft and people are going to be compared to Tyrese Haliburton. Something else Tyrese has done is the idea of you get to the postseason, the game slows down. Of course, that is true, but Indiana is showing us that even in the playoffs, they're not slowing down. They're running and running and running, and it's working in playoff basketball. And when the game does slow down, Siakam's good enough and Tyrese is hitting enough shots in the half court to where if it does slow down, they're not worried about that either. But for the most part, they are pushing the pace. So just overall, Tyrese is like the poster child for it. But overall, the identity of these teams is refreshing to me. Even OKC with Shea putting up 32, 5, and 6, crazy numbers, it doesn't feel as just one person as a lot of these other teams. When you watch them, it feels like J-Dub is actually more of the point guard. It just feels like much more of a team effort than Shea's stat line would indicate. And again, I'm not sure this means anything. I'm not really trying to say anything by it, right? Jokic could win the championship next year. Luka could win the championship next year. Giannis could win the championship next year. That's all fine. But the idea that we have a shooting guard putting up 4 assists and a point guard averaging less than 20 points in the conference finals is, to me, a great thing for basketball. It shows as much as the game has evolved, it hasn't changed that much that those guys still can't be dominant players in today's NBA. But before I make any proclamations here, let's wait and see what happens. Maybe Indiana blows a 3-1 lead. Maybe OKC blows a 3-1 lead. If they do win, I'm glad Indiana wins here because I feel like they are much more of a threat to OKC just because the slow it down nature of New York is not going to work against OKC. I wouldn't think, but Jalen Brunson surprises me every time I kind of start to doubt him. So maybe he does come back 3-1. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Please like, comment, subscribe. On the road to 10,000 subscribers. It will mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm out. Peace.